Do you think race is inherently important?
I think in the present tense, we need to redress the invention of race. What that means is acknowledging the invented categories of race and attempting to fix those disparities that have emerged. So yes, it is, but ultimately because we want to get rid of race as a meaningful category.
So you therefore obviously would change the criteria for admission to a college. You would lower the criteria for the historically oppressed groups.
If you're asking if I believe in affirmative action, I would
Yes.
point to the fact that that was made illegal with the Supreme Court case decision.
But I'm not asking you whether it's legal. I'm asking you, I think same-sex marriage is legal. It is legal.
I think
I'm not for
before
it. So I want to know if you are for changing the rules based on race.
Before we even get, and I'll answer this question, I promise, but I'm building up to it. Before we even get to university admissions, we have to interrogate the fact that black neighborhoods that are just disproportionately disadvantaged get lower quality schooling by virtue of how we fund our public schools. We need to interrogate the fact that, like, there is a serious overrepresentation of certain racial identities here at this university, and a massive underrepresentation of others, especially Hispanics at this university, when compared, for example,
And you think that's a form of racism, or because not enough Hispanics qualify to get in?
I think that is an unfortunate consequence of a system that has racially selected against these people. And I think we need to do everything, seriously, we need to do everything in our power to address that.
You've already responded.
Okay.
But that is
Please, don't yell out, man.
that is not just university admission. If you think that Hispanics are underqualified, you really need to look at why you think that is. Is it, for example, the fact that primarily Hispanic neighborhoods are in fact afforded worse funding when it comes to their schools by virtue of the fact that they have lower property taxes in these regions? Like, these are serious causal chains that we all need to interrogate.
When a conservative argues, a conservative black as well as a conservative white,
yes, argues
that by far the greatest problem in black American life is the out-of-wedlock rate, which is approximately 70 to 80%. So 7 to 8 out of 10 black children do not grow up with a father.
Yeah.
That is infinitely more problematic than white racism. You differ.
Hey, explain white racism for me really quick. What do you mean by that? Like selecting against whites at the University of California?
No. Wait, you want me to define white racism?
What do you mean white racism in this context?
Okay. The context is that the left holds that the problem facing blacks is racism. The greatest problem facing black Americans is racism. Conservatives believe that the greatest problem is a cultural/values problem. So that I'm just asserting that is a major difference, and I assume you would agree that is a major difference.
I would disagree in the fact that that would be an overgeneralization of what we're trying to accomplish. At the end of the day, we're looking at how white racism going back to the 60s and further with black Americans and Mexican Americans within this country has pushed them into the current situation where they aren't economically represented. And in some ways, that is more important than like the current form of white racism. Because I know what you're trying to do is make out the question of whether or not whites are directly responsible for how Hispanics and people of color in this country are.
Okay, please. Please save your questions, because otherwise everybody will yell. Sorry. Yep.
And we need to look back at how this is a systematic thing going back in history, rather than like a current form of racism which is being pushed on people of color.
So you think race trumps culture? I think culture trumps race. Again, my agenda this evening is to delineate the differences. Black kids who grow up with both parents have essentially the exact same economic outcomes as other kids who grow up with both parents.
Here's what I would say to that. If there is a disparity in black and white individuals growing up without parents, or without one parent, we critically need to understand why that's happening. There was a speaker who came here last semester, and for the life of me I can't remember his name, I apologize, but he spoke in Poli-Sci 179. And one of the important things he pointed out is that, yes, there is a serious disparity in terms of single-family households in the black community. Now, that is an affect in part of the fact that these communities are grossly over-policed when compared to white communities. This is a statistical
Wait,
fact.
somebody came to this university and said black communities are over-policed?
Yes, I would respond, and if I may.
Then they are over-policed by the least competent police in American history, perhaps universal history. Because the murder rates in black communities are the highest of any community in America. So if over-policed communities have the highest crime rate, the police are really awful.
I really don't like the implicit determinism that you're putting forward in that comment, sir.
What is that? There may be inferred determinism, but I don't even know what is determined by what. You don't think there's a higher violent crime rate in black communities?
You have to interrogate why those crimes happen. Nobody goes out and decides that they want to murder someone.
Yes, they do.
Without reason, nobody goes out and decides that they want to murder someone.
Okay, go ahead, please. Don't respond, otherwise we'll go. I totally get it why you want to yell at me. I totally get it. I will try to do the yelling for you without yelling.
Violent crime is not something that's innate to certain communities because of how they're structured. It is a result of serious circumstantial disadvantages that have been conferred upon this community. In the same way that no individual...
All right, do you know that the out-of-wedlock rate for blacks in the 40s was actually better than the out-of-wedlock rate for whites in the 40s? But that was at a time of Jim Crow and far more racism in America.
Yes,
maybe it has nothing to do with racism. I'm sorry?
You have to look at the over-policing communities and sending these black fathers to prison. And then they can't be there to raise their children. This is a thing that actually happens.
Oh, so that's what you, that is the reason you think that, but wait, they're not in prison when they're impregnating.
You're right, and then they're not.
So they get into prison during those 9 months?
This is a thing that's serious. There's a statistical evidence of this happening.
Okay, dude, I don't know what to tell you. Okay, we have such a different read on it. To me, everything is values. I admit it, but this is a major left-right difference. Values versus economics, values versus race, values versus whatever. And that's fine. I believe by the way, the out-of-wedlock birth rate is increasing among whites too. When there was a famous Murphy Brown, this figure on American television, had a child out of wedlock, white woman, and it was a big celebration because it was a very popular sitcom in the United States or whatever, and the vice president at the time, who was white, condemned it, and he was pilloried by the left, by the New York Times and others, for his intolerance, his judgmental nature. But this was a white woman having a child without being married to the father. We believe that it is best that if you have a child, you be married before you have the child. Do you think that that is a fair suggestion to all people of all races in our society?
I think generally speaking, it is easier to raise a child when you have the help of another individual or another set of individuals around you to help you raise that child.
But so you're not comfortable with what I just said. All things being equal, it is better to be married before having a child. You're uncomfortable with that statement. If you are, then let me just say this is a great example of why we worry about what's happening to America. You're obviously very bright, and you have used your intelligence to undo one of the most basic principles of our civilization. Get married before you have a child. It's just, I'm not angry at you, God knows, and I thank you for participating in this from the bottom of my heart, but I'm sad. What was wrong with these basic principles that you act honestly, act responsibly, don't commit crimes, have a child after you marry? Why does the left want to undo these things?
So here's how I'll respond back. First and foremost, I do want to have kids one day. I do want to be a dad. I want to help them come up with this.
Do you want to be married to their mother?
Yes. I would like to be married before I have children because I like the stability that that confers. But I would like to respond back. I earnestly would. Many people do not choose to have a child out of wedlock. Now granted, they're responsible and they're irresponsible practices.
No, I don't understand that claim. Unless they're raped, they chose it. That is not true. When you have sexual intercourse, Here's the way it is. If you have sexual intercourse, there's a good chance you'll get pregnant, especially if you're young. So therefore, if you weren't raped, you chose to have sex. If you didn't choose, then you were raped. We're not talking about rape. We're talking about choosing to have sex.
You're right.
All right, and choosing to have the baby, because one could have an abortion. I want you to choose to have the baby, even if you're single, by the way, because of my views on abortion, but that's a separate issue. And by the way, my ultimate dream would be that you gave the child up for adoption. Okay, so I just want to say that that would be my favorite outcome for most people. But I don't, see, this is what, you remind me of my Jewish relatives who by definition are liberal. And the, you know what I tell them? I tell them, why don't you preach what you practice? They practice such utterly traditional lives, but then when I preach that tradition, they call it wrong. You want to get married before you have children.
You're right, I do.
But if I say, well, what's good for you would be good for 99% of fellow Americans and humanity, then all of a sudden you're uptight about it, and I don't understand why. Why is it good for you and not for everybody?
I'd like to finish my thought with regards to choosing to have a child premaritally. Unfortunately, this United States has defaulted seriously on its responsibility for good sexual education among minors. People earnestly need to know the concept. No, I'm serious. People earnestly need to know and understand practices of good safe.
So they knew better in 1930 when the out-of-wedlock rate was so much lower for all races? Then they did have better sex education?
I would argue that the culture has changed, but on top of that, I would argue that if we're going to meet that change in culture with responsible practice of child raising, then we need to have better sexual education than we do now. And importantly, I think there is a serious problem with the Republican Party specifically with preventing the education of sex in schools. I think there also is a serious problem in terms of preventing access to contraceptives, for example.
Who prevents access to contraceptives?
If you defund Planned Parenthood, you're taking away a serious vector-wide pregnancy.
How much does a contraceptive cost? I have to admit I haven't bought one recently, but I'm in that quaint state of marriage. How much is a contraceptive?
Several dollars, but several dollars to you and me is not several dollars to another.
Oh, so you believe that's the issue. But again, why is it the issue today and it wasn't the issue 50 and 100 years ago? That's what I don't understand. There was less sex education and less money and much fewer condoms.
To answer your question on how much contraceptives cost, $10 for a box of 3 condoms and $40 for
All right, very good. All right, I'm going to ask a question now. I'll promise I'll call on it. I am going to ask a question now that was a turning point in my radio career. I began broadcasting 35 years ago, and I was in my early 30s. And I'm grateful to God and to luck and to a whole host of things that I've had such a long career. It's not easy in the media. But I remember what happened one night. I started at nighttime radio, which is the norm. And I had a show, you just called in on anything, and I got into an argument with a caller on why people commit crimes, violent crimes. And then after we debated, I said it was values, he said it was poverty. So we debated, and then it occurred to me to ask him this question. I said, sir, can I ask you, do you believe people are basically good? And he said, yes, I do. And then I realized, and it changed my career for internally. It had no effect on me professionally, but it changed the way I understood life. And I realized, of course, I don't believe people are basically good. I have the Judeo-Christian view of human nature, which is very, it's not that it's pure evil. That's not true. But it's objectively not true. There is goodness in human nature. And B, that is not the Judeo-Christian view or the Jewish or Christian view. But we have a very low opinion of human nature. If you don't fight it, you won't be good. So do you believe people are basically good?
Yeah, I'm going to go so far as to say that, everyone around us, generally speaking, does not want to be a bad person, barring, again, some extreme edge cases. I think we're all just misunderstanding what it is to be good to one another and how we should best respect one another's wants and wishes.
Okay. This is really important, and I'm very grateful. How do you feel about that?
Same.
As he, right.
In some ways, though, I do ask the question whether or not viewing ourselves as good or evil is really a possibility. Because at the end of the day, we are much more of a subject of what our actions. And so in some ways, we can't call ourselves genuinely.
I agree with you on that. I agree with that. We are our actions. I agree with you entirely. So if you primarily do good things, you're a good person. If you primarily do bad things, you're a bad person. And if you do 50-50, you're in the middle. All right, that's fine, but that's not the issue. The question was human nature. So okay, this is you are affirming the revelation that I had that night. That's the question that really divides us. Because if you believe that people murder and rape primarily because of poverty/racism, or just at that time it was just poverty even, then I realized, well, I don't think that. I think people murder and rape and steal. Did Bernie Madoff, did he embezzle billions of dollars because of poverty or racism? No, he did because of arrogance and because of a whole host of other bad aspects to his character. It was a flawed character. How many parents say to their kids, you know, I just want you to know you share too much. You have to learn to be a little more selfish. I think that's pretty rare. Parents tell their kids approximately 100,000 times, say thank you. Because being grateful, one of the most important characteristics of goodness, doesn't come naturally. Why would you believe in the light of these basic things? And I actually have an answer. I have a theory, but I'm not going to put words in your mouth. I'll wait till you finish. Why would you believe people are basically good? In the light of what I just said, in the light of the Holocaust, the Armenian genocide, the communist genocides of China and North Korea and the Soviet Union, and the vast amount of abuse of women and children on Earth, why would you still believe people are basically good? I have a theory why you believe it, but I won't say it until you answer it.
So I'll respond back by first and foremost saying perhaps I oversimplified my perspective. I, at the end of the day, am kind of a sucker for Foucault. I mean, he taught at Berkeley, so it's kind of a given. I think that to interrogate human nature is to take too much away from the fact that our character is socially determined. I think earnestly Bernie Madoff sought to, and not to put motivations in his mouth because God knows I can't. I think he sought to embezzle and to steal in spite of not needing it because socially he was told to accumulate and damn the consequences. I don't think he's an innately bad person. I think he has a bad character. I just think that was a product of his upbringing and some of the mores that he was told to participate in. Now, I like to imagine that human beings are basically good creatures that want to follow the categorical imperative, that want to follow the beatitudes, that want to do unto others as they do unto themselves. Because we as human beings critically have empathy. We understand what it is to be around people and understand that, broadly speaking, they feel in much of the same manners that we do. Now, that being said, I would call that empathy something that is innately good. But I would also say that that is something that can very easily be overpowered by a society that tells you, damn be the rest of them, I will do for them.
So America is more responsible for Bernie Madoff than Bernie Madoff?
I think Bernie Madoff at the end of the day is responsible for his own actions. But we need to know why he took those actions so that we can prevent other people from doing it in the future.
In Papua New Guinea, you don't think men are cheating other men like he did?
I don't know anything about Papua New Guinea culture.
All right. Well, I do, but it doesn't matter. I just picked that. All right. So here is my theory on why you think people are basically good.
Okay.
Because you live in America, which is a basically good country, and you don't have a universal understanding of how crappy the human race is.
Oh. I really have.
If
but
you only lived in America, the odds are against it. You don't know how crappy, I repeat, you don't know how crappy the human race is.
I would fire back.
This is
For example, if you see crappiness in Syria, that might be an affect of the fact that they're going through a civil war.
Yeah, of course that's true. We went through a civil war too, and there was a lot of bad stuff that happened.
Absolutely.
When in war, bad things happen. We understand
But
that.
the fact of the matter is human beings got better because they had
But but Syria was crappy before the Civil War. Yes.
I'm not taking it.
Okay, fine. Okay, so now it's time, do we have microphones? What's the story?
No, we don't have time for Q&A.
Oh my God.